Now we have Chris Molaro joining us. Chris was a graduate from West Point and served as a field artillery officer, was stationed at Fort Hood in Texas, and served for about a year in Iraq during that time. Then he went back to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where he finished out his Army career, and then in 2015 entered the Wharton School up in Pennsylvania. And while he was at the Wharton School, he did a summer internship at McKinsey and then founded his own company called NeuroFlow, where he's been working ever since. And he's grown NeuroFlow from his 2 employees all the way to over 100 employees now. So Chris, welcome to the class.
Thanks so much for having me, Terrence. Excited to be here.
So I talked briefly about your professional journey, but I'm sure I left quite a bit out. Can you tell me just a little bit more about your professional journey?
Yeah, you made me sound like a rock star. You're my hype man over here. So thank you. I was thrilled to have the opportunity to go to West Point. I don't come from a military family. I actually was the first person to go to college in my family, and so the military was one of the only options I had to pay for college. Somehow, it's better to be lucky than it is good sometimes, and was lucky enough to get an appointment to the academy, and met some phenomenal people there that I like to say really blew the top off of what I thought was possible. Like, I was from Long Island originally, didn't know really anything outside of that community. And then I met people from all over the world and got to travel the world in the Army. In the Army, like you said, deployed to Iraq as a platoon leader, so I had 40 soldiers. And aside from doing that mission, what it really taught me, it was about organizational leadership, leading with not a lot of information all the time and not a lot of resources, but you had to figure it out, and you only had the people to your left and right. I'm proud that I've been able to translate a lot of that experience into my professional life now, which we could talk more about. But I was given some great advice that was to run to something, not away from something. So I didn't get out of the Army just to get out of it. I had a great opportunity to go to Wharton for my MBA, and so I ran to that opportunity. And I miss the Army in a lot of ways, but I like to think I'm serving the country in a different way in the medical field today. And here we are today. So again, thanks for having me, and excited to talk about it.
Absolutely, and thanks again for being here. And so you're talking about serving the country. I mean, you have NeuroFlow is in so many healthcare systems now, and you are all over the country and in different parts of the world. And you've also grown from just a couple of employees to 100 employees, which is no small feat to do that in less than 7 years. And so I'm curious, before we get into today's topic, how do you think about leadership? How do you think about managing? And because you learned quite a bit about it during your military time, and then you mentioned you're running towards something. I love that. You ran towards it, but how do you think about leading and managing people?
Well, first, not to shortchange me, we're at 125 employees today. And we need every single one of them to accomplish our mission. So I have to highlight that. It's a great question. And I think one thing for me, and I've been through this journey a lot over the last 7 years, is a constant reinvention of what it means to lead at the different stages of the company. So when we were 5 employees or 10 employees, it required a different leader and a different CEO than when we were at 50 employees and then when we are now at 125 employees. And that, I think I took for granted at the beginning. I was like, I'll just grow and I'll evolve over time. And I think in hindsight, I realized it took a lot more intentional effort on my part to make those adjustments. And that's for leadership. In terms of management, it's interesting. I guess one, it's important to maybe describe how I see the two being different. So management is more operational, It's more, um, you know, goal oriented in a way of you have objective A to B with certain constraints involved, like maybe budget and time, and you have to achieve those goals in that time frame, and you're managing that process or managing that project. It doesn't always have to involve people, right? When you think about like, um, in a personal sense, like I have my workout schedule, I'm managing my health and my workout, and or you might have a project that you're doing that's just yourself, you're managing that. Leadership is about the people involved. And I like to remind people at my company that even if you're not a manager, in the sense that you're not put in charge of a project, everybody has the opportunity to be a leader, if not a leader of a team, a leader amongst your peers. And to me, I think that's a nuanced difference, but it's a very important difference, and it's one that I think we strive to have everybody take ownership of that while they're at NeuroFlow, and because when they do that, you have a culture then that has everybody saying like, no one points fingers. Everybody takes ownership of leading the mission and making sure that we're successful as a team. It's very similar, I think, to our military experience, and that's I've tried to adapt that to the private world now.
Thanks for offering that distinction between leader and manager. And I think, it can be really helpful sometimes to think about that distinction. And I love what you said about how you try to instill in your employees this leadership mindset that even if you're not in an official leadership position, there's still opportunities to lead. And, one of a big factor, I feel like, in successful leadership is our ability to bounce back from obstacles, to overcome obstacles. And I'm curious, I imagine in a startup, things can seem like a roller coaster, hour to hour, day to day, week to week. And how have you tried to instill a mindset within the company for being able to bounce back pretty quickly from setbacks?
It's an important question because I think no matter what happens in life, we're going to have setbacks. I mean, especially when you're in an early stage company, it's just part of the gig. So there are, and I talk about this at the company constantly. I cite two principles or two books and stories, if you will, that I reference with the company. And one of them is the Stockdale paradox, named after Admiral Stockdale. And the other is Stoicism, which is the philosophy born of meditations written by Marcus Aurelius. And, Stockdale paradox talks about, it's an amazing story. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage everybody to just, Google Stockdale paradox. And the Admiral Stockdale was a prisoner of war in Vietnam. I think he was prisoner of war for, like, I might get the facts wrong, but 7 years or something like that. And he ends up surviving, not only surviving, but becoming a senator and, well, first getting promoted to be an admiral, which is, for the Navy, as an Army guy, whatever, but still very impressive in the Navy, and then becomes vice president candidate. It's like remarkable. It's like somebody goes from a prisoner of war, 7 years of the harshest environment you can imagine, to being a candidate for vice president of the United States. And when he was asked, like, how did you get through that? He said it was the mentality that it's owning the fact that it's going to be really hard, like succumbing to that, saying, okay, this is going to be extremely difficult, but having the optimism that you're going to get out in the end. But at the same time, not ever getting your hopes up. And what he said was, I mean, there were a number of his fellow prisoners that died along the way. And he said the people that died were the people that got their hopes up and said, by Christmas time, we're going to leave. And they weren't out of there. By summertime, they're going to, and they, like, eventually just had their spirits broken. It was the opposite of resilient. It was fragile, because they just, they had their hopes up, and he just never got his hopes up, but he always was optimistic that he was going to get out of it. And I apply that to our, the startup world, it's going to be really hard, like really hard. There's going to be times where we are under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, sleepless nights, sleepless weeks. But if we do it well, we're optimistic that we're going to have a really good outcome in the end, both for the outcomes that we're going to make for patients, and financially, we're going to sell a company hopefully and make a good outcome for all our shareholders. But at the same time, never get your hopes, like never say, okay, next year we're going to sell, because next year, and then next year comes and goes, and it's still, you're trudging along, and you end up just wanting to quit. And so I tell everybody, I remind everybody of the Stockdale paradox. It's a very similar mentality. Now, fortunately, it's not life and death, stakes here, but the principle is the same. With Stoicism, and I think this is really key, one of the principles of Stoicism is you can't control the things around you. You can only control how you react to them. And it's a lot easier said than done. But if you can truly practice that, it is an incredibly empowering mentality, because then you're in control of your destiny. Doesn't matter what else happens around you. Like, you're in control of your fate and your mindset. And so there's more setbacks than I can count, or that I care to remember. I mean, there's like failure among failure among failure. But as long as we choose to learn from each of those failures, and that might sound corny, oh, I'm going to learn from my failure, but truly, like, if you could go back, and in the Army, we called this an after action review, or AAR. If you could go back and say, okay, let's not point fingers, let's not get angry, let's understand what happened, let's learn, let's try, and then if we can become better for that moving forward, now you just got stronger. So you end up turning in what's a negative into a positive. I'll just give one example. Last year, we ended up losing a fairly big client. It was significant revenue for us, and it was not a good situation. And we stayed calm, and we said, okay, like, let's try to learn from this. And what happened? What did we miss? What could we have done proactively to avoid this from happening? And I genuinely believe that those lessons learned and the things we have in place now to avoid that from happening in the future are worth 10x what the value of that contract is worth. And so it actually ends up making us stronger and better moving forward. And, to tie it back to your question, it makes us more resilient as an organization and as an individual, as a leader in the organization.
Absolutely. And that sounds really powerful, being able to not only apply lessons from Stockdale, but then also apply lessons from Marcus Aurelius and the Stoic school to your company. And so I'm curious, it sounds like you are able to have this perspective and incorporate some of the principles of Stoicism and, eventually cognitive behavioral therapy in terms of, with those reframing techniques. But how do you try to instill that in your employees? And, because I imagine that as you've grown really quickly over the past 7 years, it may be challenging to do that. And so do you try hiring for that? Or do you try hitting on some of these principles during company meetings? How do you try to incorporate some of these principles as you've talked to and led your employees?
The challenge that we have is, as we scale, making sure that the mentality and the culture within that mentality scales with it. And the culture, things will change as we grow and we scale. Like, we're not going to at 125 people, we're still small enough where we know everybody, or we should know everybody. But we're also not going to be going to a happy hour every night with everybody, like when we were 10 employees. And so there's elements that will change, but you want the essence, the foundational elements of what we believe made us special and continue to make us special and innovative to thrive and to live on. And so then the question is, like, how do you maintain that? And by the way, we think that a foundational element of our culture are those mentalities, are the same mentality of Stockdale and the Stoic principles. And so you're exactly right. The first element of doing that is hiring. The Jim Collins in his book Good to Great talks about the principle of right people, right seats. Right seats is more obvious. It's the um, do you have the baseline ability to do the job that's required? Like, are you in the right seat? Right people is a lot different in the sense that you want the person. For us, it's always been trying to solve for the person that is curious, person that wants to continue to learn and continue to adapt. We have a value at the company that says strive for personal and holistic self-improvement. So it's like always wanting to I read books or listen to podcasts and not just kind of go through the motion of your job, but look at this as more of I mean, at the very least, in a startup world, you're spending more than 40 hours a week working. But if you're in a 9 to 5 job, you're spending 40 hours a week. That's a lot of time that you want to learn and grow in that experience. And so we want people that want to learn, want to grow. I always say it's an interesting combination of people that we have here, where we are humble enough to say, like, we don't know something and we need to learn that, or we need to figure it out. But we're confident enough to say that we're the best people to figure it out, and we're going to figure it out. So it's this, right? We're not cocky saying, oh, we know everything, but we're confident to say what we don't know, we could figure it out. And I think that mentality has been a big shift for us, or that mentality, maintaining that mentality has been a big reason for our culture maintaining the way it is. But then beyond that, so now, okay, you hire the right people. We're not 100%. We don't bat 1,000. So we need to make sure that if there's a first sign of that, of us mishiring, and somebody doesn't have that, we have a critical conversation with that person and say, like, I don't know if this is the best place for you. And we try to exit them as, as respectfully as possible. For the people that are here, then it's about nurturing that mentality and helping that grow and thrive. And so there's little things that we do from our values. If you visit neuroflow.com, you go to the About Us page, you can see our values, espouse these ideas. We have all our conference rooms named after these different mentalities. So we have the Aurelius conference room after Marcus Aurelius, father of Stoicism. We do things where at company-wide meetings, we have a Living the Values segment, which is everybody has an opportunity to call out a colleague for, to give them praise in front of the entire company for something that they did that espoused one of our values and like the NeuroFlow way of doing things. And, that's always been a fan favorite. We always run out of time. We can't get to everybody, which I think is a good sign. And so it's things like that. And it's about rewarding the people that thrive and that really take ownership of that, and about having real consequences for the people that don't. And that, I think, has been a key to success.
So as a mental health company, it sounds like you're doing awesome things to nurture mental health in your own employees and having people bounce back from setbacks and becoming more resilient. And you hit on some the growth mindset earlier as well, in terms of encouraging your employees to listen to podcasts and read books. I'm curious how you've approached situations where I imagine it's not always easy for employees to be able to bounce back, and so you feel like you hired the right person, but then there's a setback, and you feel like you have an employee that may be struggling with that setback. What do you do, or what do you encourage the leaders below you to do in terms of trying to foster and continue that growth mindset?
Well, I think what we try to do is that we don't have anything be punitive in nature. So let me take a step back. So we try to say, I never call us a family here at NeuroFlow. Like, first of all, I think it's trite. I mean, we're not a family. You can't choose who your family is. Your family's your family, and you have to make it work or not with them. We choose to be here and to work with who we want to. So I think rather than a family, we're like a professional sports team. And as a professional sports team, you have a mission to win every day. And you want the best players to be in each position. And just like a professional sports team, you have each other's backs and you're a team. And there are going to be players on that team that have their off days, that make mistakes and errors. They're not going to be fired or traded away after one off game or even a slump over a few weeks. And so there's an opportunity to improve and to learn and to get to look past that error and say, okay, I made a mistake. How am I going to improve from that? Um, it's when you see a trend over time or where they're toxic in the clubhouse that you need to make a change. And that's the way that we view it here, is that we encourage people to make mistakes. If you're not making mistakes here, it means that you're not pushing the envelope enough, and you're not being innovative enough and really trying to become better. You should make mistakes here. You're not going to be punished for that. But when you do make a mistake, let's take a tactical pause, learn from that. I really understand what that mistake was, not again in a punitive way, and then grow from that and have a plan to grow from that. And so one of the other things we do at the company is we have a stipend that goes up based on tenure for professional development. Anything you want to do too. So it could be like if you want to work on your public speaking, you could use that stipend to pay for a speech coach. You could sign up for if you're a data scientist that wants to learn about Web 3.0 or AI, you could use it for a boot camp related to that. And so we encourage that, and we want people to celebrate the failures almost as much as the wins, because that's how you push the envelope. That's how you change the game. And in our world, that's how you change healthcare. And I think when you do that, it's people find it really refreshing. I'll also say there's a personal element here too, because it's not just professional setbacks. We're all human. And so there's personal life setbacks too. Maybe you're going through marital problems, or maybe you have illness in your family, or maybe there's a lot of things that happen. And so how do you handle that in a realistic way that doesn't encumber performance at work? We say, and this may not be popular today, but I think it's important. I don't believe so much in work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration. And that's to say that when you're in a professional field like we are, the line is too blurry to separate your work. Like if a client calls me in the evening, I can't say, well, I'm off the clock, I'll call you back tomorrow morning. It's like I may have to attend to that. But if I have the right expectations in place and systems in place and support in place, you can make that work. And so I want to know when somebody is going through something in their home life, so that I can be aware of that and make the right adjustments from an expectation at work standpoint. And that is something that's a lot harder to do, especially as you scale, because there's, a new employee might have trust issues with that. And so you really want to help guide them to that. And it's, I think it's been something that's been a competitive advantage for us with our culture, but something I'd recommend all of the students in this class to look at moving forward, in terms of your employees are humans that have lives outside of work. And if you think that is not impacting their work, we're missing an opportunity to optimize them as our partners.
Very insightful, and it sounds like NeuroFlow is doing really innovative things on the front of just growing your employees. And so love what you're doing, and some of the innovation, particularly the stipend. I think that is really innovative and fun idea. And the final question I'll ask here, it's a little bit more personal, and I'm curious, what is the value what has the value of your MBA been for you? And we have MBA students who are in the middle of their program. And so 7 years removed from, or over 7 years removed from your MBA program, what has been the value for you?
So I think for me, and again, everybody's different, but my professional background prior to the MBA was the military world. And so while the military world in West Point had given me, I think, a lot in terms of leadership, organizational management, problem-solving frameworks, it didn't give me anything related to business. Like raising venture capital money was a foreign concept to me. The notion of what pre-money, post-money is, it's a pretty straightforward concept, but I had no idea what that was. And so from a knowledge standpoint, it gave me the kind of the baseline vocabulary, if you will, to be able to talk business in an intelligent way. Similar to the military, like they're not going to make you a platoon leader until you're proficient with your rifle. So the same thing with I didn't feel prepared to say I could be a leader in business until I was proficient with the basics. And so for me personally, it helped bridge that gap. But that's like, you could also do that just by reading books and so forth. That you don't need an MBA for that necessarily. What the MBA gave me that I don't think you could get without the MBA was, everybody talks about the network, but the network is one of those things that you only get out of it what you put into it. And there's friendships that we've had that I have had for life now. Well, I guess not life, 7 years now post MBA, but where we lean on each other and like we'll give update. We make an intentional effort to keep in touch with our classmates in spite of life being busy. To what's your next career goal? How can we help you? Or how can I'm going to be visiting this city. Would love to grab coffee with you. And again, it goes back to the growth mindset, continuing to learn and so forth. And we're so lucky to be surrounded by our classmates who come from diverse backgrounds, will have diverse futures and different perspectives. I think it's a huge opportunity to be able to grow and learn from them and each other, both while you're in the MBA program, but definitely after the MBA program as well. And I just feel really lucky to have that network of friends and colleagues and people I could call on as almost like personal advisors, throughout this journey of starting NeuroFlow.
Chris Molaro, founder and CEO of NeuroFlow. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Terrence.